Hello everybody, this is Rudra Pradhan here. Welcome to BMD lecture series. Today we will continue with decision analytics and the coverage is decision tree. We have already discussed this particular concept in the last lecture, and today we will continue with the same concept and we can connect with different kind of examples. So, technically decision tree is not something different, it is a similar kind of decision making process with the particular business problem. We have lots of possible outcomes corresponding to different alternatives and different strategy, and the idea behind this particular process, the decision making process, is to find out the best outcome out of all possible outcomes which can address the business problem more effectively and as per the particular business requirement. We have already discussed several decision making criteria, starting with aggressive strategy, the kind of minimax principles, max-min principles, through which we can pick up a particular outcome and which can address the business problems as per the requirement. And now decision tree will give you some kind of better visualizations corresponding to all possible outcomes with respect to different alternatives and different business conditions. So, what will you like to know? So, what is exactly the decision tree concept and what are the things are there in the decision tree, and how is this particular technique can be visualized properly to address the business problem. So, there are a couple of things in this particular structure. So, first thing is what about the decision tree, and it is connected with the nodes and then connected with the decision nodes and then event nodes. So, I have already highlighted what is this particular concept. So, it consists of nodes and branches, and these are all very useful kind of concept or the kind of approach to structuring the decision problems involving various uncertainty. So, the nodes are points in time at which events takes place, and decision nodes are nodes in which a decision takes place by choosing among several alternatives. Then finally, event nodes are nodes in which an event occurs not controlled by the decision makers. So, that means with these items we like to prepare a kind of decision tree, and for that we need to have various alternatives and various situations, and corresponding to these alternatives and situations we have a different kind of outcomes, and sometimes these outcomes are connected with the probability and these outcomes are connected with the without probability. So, let us see how is this particular structure, and then we come with a kind of thought process through which you can address the business problem more accurately. So, now corresponding to these items, so let us see how is this particular decision making process or the decision tree. So, the kind of items means the decision tree is not something different. So, whatever we have discussed, but we try to bring all these alternatives and the kind of strategies and the outcomes in a kind of structured format only. So, that means it will give you more practical kind of things, or more visualization kind of things through which you can understand the problems and then come with a kind of decision through which you can address the business problem more effectively. So, this is what risk solver package through which you can actually work out the decision tree, and for the kind of decision tree, the typical requirement is the various alternatives and the various outcomes levels corresponding to these alternatives and the kind of situations. So, now so what we have already discussed. So, now in the case of decision tree, so if you come with the kind of structure, this is how the particular structure which in fact I have highlighted in the last lecture. So, now we have a problem here. So, you see here problem is here, the kind of okay. So, the kind of requirement is here. So, these are all three alternatives, and then and corresponding these three alternatives we just plot in this particular decision making process. So the decision tree will give you more clarity that this is what the problem, and it has a three different alternatives. So 1 year ARM, 3 year ARM, and 30 year fixed. Then again against 1 year ARM, so we have a three different options. So rates increase, rates stables, and rates fall. Similarly, in the case of 3 years ARMs, we have also three options. Again 30 years fixed, we have also three options. So that means practically decision tree will not give you something different kind of output, but the same level of output which can produce more accurately or more clearly, so that anybody can understand and practically see the kind of feasibility. Then we can pick up a particular situation or outcome through which you can address this business problem. So likewise, so the complete the decision tree. So this is first node, and then the complete matrix will be like this. So starting, actually we have a three different alternatives: alternative 1, alternative 2, alternative 3. So every alternatives have a outcomes corresponding to three different situations. Similarly, for second alternatives we have a three different situations. Corresponding to three different alternatives, we have three different outcomes under three different situations. That is how the situation 1, situation 2, situation 3 for alternative 1, and then again situation 1, situation 2, situation 3 for alternative 2, again situation 1, situation 2, situation 3 for alternative 3. So that means technically corresponding to three alternatives and three different situations, we have a payoff matrix of 1 1 1 2 1 3, then 2 1 2 2 2 2 3, then 3 1 3 2 3 3. So 9 different outcomes. So these 9 outcomes are actually projected here. So that means the same problem we have already highlighted and applied different techniques, like aggressive strategy, conservative strategy, through which you can pick up a particular outcomes, let us say this ones, to address this business problem. But now connecting to these alternatives, the situation, the kind of an outcome. So decision tree will cover all these outcomes and project the kind of things more accurately and more effectively, so that anybody can understand, and we can compare each case perfectly, so that the decision making process will be more effective and give you more kind of clarity to address the business problem. So this is how the decision tree will be very useful. And then similarly, so these are all different kind of options. If you means, or technically you can manually draw this particular structure and then project the kind of environment, or else you can use the software. The software will by default will give you the same kind of flow chart. So the idea behind this kind of structure, that with the help of decision tree, it will project the entire business problems with all such alternatives outcomes. So then we are in fact sometimes confused that how the best outcome is detected or the kind of observed through which address the business problem. But here it will give you some kind of comparative kind of analysis, and that too when we pick up a particular decision, so it will be give you some kind of indication that yes, this is how the best, and that is how we can address the business problem effectively. So likewise, this is similar kind of visualization. Now through plotting, so we can have this particular decision tree, and that to now apply the minimization. So that means manually you can do and give the indication, or else in the ERIC solvers you can give the indication about the minimization. By default this will be clearly highlighted. So that means technically compared to the previous scenario, so now this outcome is actually more accurately specified, so that it will give you better understanding, better visualizations compared to the previous kind of structuring. So that is how this kind of situation where we need actually to have a decision making process, that too with the help of various alternatives and different situation. So, decision tree is the best kind of structure through which you can project the outcome as per the particular business requirement. So, that means technically it is a kind of platform through which you can present all such outcomes corresponding to different alternatives and different situations. After projecting all these things, we can actually pick up a best strategy through which you can visualize the problem more effectively. So, that is how the that is why the case through which you can address, and similarly this is more kind of restructuring through which you can address this similar kind of process. In fact, let us say we have actually consider the kind of weighted average kind of concept. That means corresponding to 3 different options, we have a 3 different situations, and sometimes corresponding to probability we can find out the mean value and we can project the mean value here. So, that means after reporting the kind of structuring, so you can apply the particular trick, then the kind of structure again. So, this platform can give you more more much better visualization and more practical kind of understanding through which you can address the business problem, and that too. So, it is actually very clear, and that too we can actually you can pick up the particular outcome through which you can address the business problem. So, now in order to understand the the particular structure, so we can start with another example. So, this is a pharmaceutical R&D model, and again so it is a kind of investment decision. So, now the investment decision is having actually the kind of 3 different alternatives, large, medium and small, and again market potential expectation revenue is $4,500 dollars, then $2,200 and $1,500, and corresponding to these potential outcomes or revenue. So, we have a corresponding probability, because it is actually business which is not actually clearly certain. So, it is uncertain. That means most of the instances business is very dynamic, and there is a lots of uncertainty and risks. So, that is how always probability will be connected to address this this type of problem while taking some kind of management decision. So, now with this 3 different alternatives and the outcomes, so a decision tree can be also developed. So, that means actually decision tree is not something different. So, it is a kind of concept having the inputs and outputs. So, we like to actually put in a kind of platform or kind of path diagrams or the kind of branching through which you can it will give you better visualization. So, it is a completely kind of flowchart concept, starting with inputs to the kind of output, and then we like to see which particular outcome will be the best outcomes corresponding to a particular problem. So, this is how the kind of case. So, now with this with these inputs, so the typical decision tree will be like this. So, this is how the kind of case. So, we have it, since it is actually a 3 different case. So, we can have the concept like this, and then the particular structure can be again let us say this is start with conduct clinical trials and then stop development. So, this is how the starting process. Now, if this is actually stopped here, this will continue. So, now one side continues with successful and not successful, right. So, again so we have 2 different branching, and then again so again this can be a further branch, like so if not successful we can stop here, then this part can continue, and this part continue with seek FDA approval and then stop development. So, that means technically this is the kind of this is the kind of another entry, and here so approved not approved, then again having market large, market medium and market small. So, that means so this is a typical kind of structures where we start with two different branching. So, this is active, this is not active. So, we can stop here. Again, so with this particular item, so we have a successful option, unsuccessful option. So, unsuccessful option, so we can stop here, then this will continue. We need actually approval if it is successful, and then not approved, that means stop development, and then successful, then approved, then after that approval accepted and not accepted. So, this will be again close here, and once it is approved, so then the outcome will be generated here with market large, market medium, and market small. So, now so the loop can be ended here, and these are all possible actually possible output with the corresponding probability. So, that means it is a kind of conditional kind of situation. So, that is how sometimes we use conditional probability to address this kind of problem. So, now ultimately, so this outcome will be this condition with this, and this. So, this is how the kind of connections, and that to to address this particular problem. So, I will say it is a kind of practically it is a more visualization structure through which you can understand the problem more accurately and come with a kind of outcome which can address the business problem as per the particular requirement. So, now and this is another examples, and similarly we can have a different options, and again, so these are all various descriptive statistics about this problem. So, now so what we can do here. So, decision tree has a two different structure. The first part, it will give you the kind of visualization, that means corresponding to various alternatives like which you have here only. So, corresponding to various alternatives. So, we have the complete picture. So, earlier it was in a kind of tabular format. So, now it is in a kind of diagrammatic format, or the kind of flowchart format, or the kind of branching format, through which you can see the actual possible outcomes under different situation and different conditions. And then the issue is, after visualization, the typical issue is which one is the final choice. For that, the ultimate requirement is to pick up a particular technique through which you can take the kind of decision. So, that means, so now so we have actually different option here, see here. So, these are all developed stop development. So, that means a developed drug and stop development. So, if you go to the previous slides, so you will find. So, let us the case here, stop development and approved. So, this is the case here, and then in this case after this we have a different kind of structure. So, corresponding to unsuccessful. So, these are the possible outcomes, then the kind of in the case of successful, these are the possible outcomes. So, likewise we have a different levels of outcomes, then this is under large market, medium market, and small market. So, now we have a different kind of outcome, and then we can apply aggressive strategy or conservative strategy or opportunity loss decision strategy. So, that means to pick up a particular actually the outcomes under different possible outcomes. So, we have to apply a particular strategy, and then pick up a outcome which can address this business problem, and that to help the decision makers to work out the problem as per the particular management requirement. So, now likewise we can actually again follow the particular path, and here so this is how this the kind of stop development case, and then not successful case, then this is not approved case, and then under 3 different market conditions. So, this is how the kind of structure, and the same structure we have plotted here with different kind of options. So, that means we start with developed drug and stop development. So, this is the first node, and for that so this is how the typical structure. So, that means corresponding to the first column. So, this is how we are here, then corresponding to the kind of second option. So, now with respect to the second options, so now what will you have here, the second node. So, that means technically, so we are here only. So, similarly again for third node here, then fourth node here, fifth node here. So, this is how the typical development, and then finally, we can project actually different level of outcomes corresponding to different strategy and different options, and then finally, we have to pick up a particular outcome and on the basis of a particular strategy. So, in this case, if we apply maximax strategy, that is aggressive maxima strategy. So, what will we do? So, we have to find out maximum among all these outcomes, and then accordingly we have to take the decision. So, here developed drugs, so 3925, and then again stop development it is a 300. So, technically, so that means in this case if we apply this maximax criteria. So, the first option is the out of all possible outcomes, which one is the maximum. So, this is the maximum one, and then in the case of stop development. So, this is actually the maximum. Then between these two, so we have to pick up which one is the best finally. So, that means we have a different kind of option. So, it is the step by step process. So, ultimately we need a single outcome through which you can actually address this business problem. So, initially start with various alternative, various situation, then we will have a various projected outcomes, then with the different levels of processing, application of different strategy, we will streamline to a particular levels where a single the choice will be the single outcome, and that to the situation where we can address the business problem more effectively, and that is how the typical requirement of the decision tree. So, now corresponding to this outputs, then finally, so if you apply the maximum criteria, so ultimately, so this will be the minimum, and then finally you have to find out which one is the best requirement as per the minimum PEP. So, as a result, so 300 will be the best choice as per the particular requirement. Again, having the same input tables here, so we can apply the opportunity loss strategy, then pick up the decision. So, here we have to find out the minimum, and then for instance, in this case the minimum is 300. So, ultimately, so this particular column will transport to this one. Similarly, here 300 is the minimum. So, this will be transport matrix, then finally, the entire matrix will be transport into this matrix, and then again we pick up the maximum one out of all these possible cases. Again we have to find out the maximum one out of all these possible cases. So, then we like to find out the minimum of all these maximum possibilities. So, which will give you the kind of the value where we have only 275. So, that means technically, so this is a kind of process through which we can address the business problem more accurately, and then come with a kind of decision through which you can project the business environment more effectively. And similarly, this is another kind of structure through which it will give you more kind of visualization. So, that is called as terminal outcomes. So, that means with respect to different branching corresponding to different alternatives and situation, we have all sort outcomes. So, all these outcomes could be gathered, then finally, with a particular technique you have to pick up a outcome which can address the business problem, and that too as per the particular requirement. So, now likewise we have a different different kind of problems, and corresponding to a kind of problems. So, we can prepare a decision tree which can give you more clarity and more visualization to address the business problem, and allow the decision makers to pick up a particular outcome through which you can say management decision will be more effective. So, this is how the decision tree helps lot to address the business problem as per the requirement. So, this is another problems that is connected to airline revenue management. So, these are all inputs. Then now we can prepare a actually decision tree. That means actually, so the whole idea about the decision tree is that it will give you some kind of structure where we have actually possible outcomes corresponding to different alternatives and different situations, and we, in fact we are very much sure that a particular outcomes under different possibilities can be the best through which you can visualize the problem more accurately. So, likewise in this case we have the platform like this, and then again so we have to pick up a particular structure as per the requirement. So, now likewise it is a complete it is a very interesting structure through which you can address the business problems as per the particular requirement. And in fact, the problem which you have discussed till now is a kind of simple structure, and now when the problem is very complex, for instance we have a more number of alternatives, more different situation, under each different situation we have a different options altogether. So, that means it is a branching upon branching upon branching. So, like that every case we have a different kind of options, and corresponding to different options we have a different level of outcomes. For instance, this is what the cited example here, and this is what it is called as multi-stage decision trees. So, that means we start with here a kind of examples. So, the first decision point will be here now, and in the this is how the kind of structure. So, the first decision point, so the first decision point is here, and then it has two options, and no survey and have a survey. So, now this is how the initial kind of investment, and with no survey then ultimately we reach this point, and with the survey we reach this point. So, with survey, so the total outcome will be like this, and here the total outcome will be like this. Then again this will give you some kind of first hand decision making process. So, after the first hand decision making process, so we have another kind of branching. So, that means, so first level of branching is survey with survey, without survey. So, this is first branching. Then we know with no survey, so this will be against large plant, small plant and no plant. So, this is second level branching, and again so with survey, so we have a positive results and we may have actually negative results. Since it is actually no survey, so the positive results and negative results are not appearing here. So, with survey we can have positive result and we can have negative results. So, then again, so with respect to no survey, where no question of positive results and negative result. So, as a result the branching will start with three different plants, large plant, small plant and no plant, and again with survey we have two different branching again. So, with positive result and with negative results. For positive results, so the percentage of probability weight is here 0.57, and here the probability range is 0.43. So, that means technically, so this outcomes corresponding to this outcomes, it will generate the typical final outcome this much, and that is 16,540. So, now the second level of branching will start from here. So, this is first level branching no survey. So, then the second level branching will apply with large plant, small plant and no plant, but in with survey we have actually two different cluster altogether before we go for branching against large plant, small plant and no plant. So, so technically with survey we have actually 6 different options, one option with positive results that will generate 3 different outcomes, and another with negative result that will again give you 3 different outcomes. So, now ultimately without survey it will give you 3 different outcomes against large plant, small plant and no plant. Again with survey we have 2 different branching, positive results, negative results, and each case we have 3 different outcomes against large plant, small plant and no plant. Again with the negative results we have again large plant, small plant and no plant. Then finally, if you go by large plant kind of clustering, it has again 3 options, high demand, moderate demand and low demand. So, that means technically we start with 2, and the first one is having only one options because there is no survey. Then the second one is having 2 different options, positive results, negative results. Then ultimately after the end of the first decisions which we have actually 3 different nodes further to extend. So, as a result we have a 3 different nodes here, and these nodes can be again applied under 3 different situations, that is the large plant, small plant, no plant, and as a result. So, against 3 different nodes we have actually a 3 case, ultimately again 9 different outputs here, and each case we have the kind of outcome, and against in each case we have a 3 different levels of outcomes corresponding to high demand, moderate demand and low demand, and for that we have also probability 0.023, 0.543 and 0.43 pro, and this will give you the total probability exactly equal to 1. And similarly, in the case of in a small plant, and not necessarily the probabilities will be same. So, it will be definitely different, because high demand it is a case of large plant, and it is a case of small plant. Again, in the case of no plant, so there is no demand at all. So, obviously, there is no demand. So, that means there is no further branching here, and so as a result, so large plant we have a 3 different options, and small plant again we have a 3 different options. Similarly, the second node can generate actually 3 different output against large plant, small plant and no plant, and further extension, large plant will produce 3 different outcomes corresponding to high demand, moderate demand and low demand, and similarly small plant can produce 3 different level of output against high demand, moderate demand and low demand, and finally again against 3 nodes. So, we have actually 2 different levels of output, large plant, small plant, 3 different levels of output, large plant, small plant and no plant, and again. So, we have a 3 different outputs against high demand, moderate demand and low demand, and this is also equally true in the case of a small plant, and no demand against actually no plant. So, ultimately so the node will be closed here, and in fact depending upon the business environment and the kind of business dynamics and the kind of business requirement. So, this node can further extend if you apply some kind of further criteria or the kind of constraints. So, technically this has lots of flexibility, and every times with respect to a particular alternatives and the kind of remarks and constraints, we can have a different kind of branching, and corresponding to the inputs under each alternative and each different situation, we can have the outcome, and these outcomes are connected with the different probability. Then finally, you can pick up the particular outcomes which can address the business problem more effectively, and that too as per the particular requirement. So, ultimately, so this is how the complete structure, and these are all the final outcome against each different options corresponding to the second node and the first node. So, that means it is a kind of conditional probability kind of environment through which we can address the business problem more effectively. So, there are lots of probability theorem through which conditional probability can be applied in this kind of situations, and then predict the business environment as per the particular management requirement. So, so that means technically what I like to say that decision tree is a kind of effective tool through which we can analyze the business situations more effectively, and that to bring with various outcomes corresponding to various alternatives and different strategy, and then with respect to a particular criteria, decision making criteria, we have to pick up a particular outcomes which can be considered as the best outcome as per the various alternative, various situations, and that will address the business problem more accurately, more efficiently and more effectively, and that too as per the management requirement. With this, we will stop here. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.